What if I told you that behind the dazzling marble columns and golden palaces of the Roman Empire lay one of history's darkest and most forbidden secrets, a hidden world where beauty became a prison and power devoured innocence, a truth so shocking it could rewrite everything you thought you knew about ancient Rome? In the glittering heart of the empire, while emperors etched their names into eternity through conquests, grand architecture, and legal codes that would shape civilizations, there existed an undercurrent of cruelty so profound that it remains a shadow on history's stage. This is not merely a story of slaves or servants, but of young men, some barely in their teenage years, who were forced into lives of servitude as male concubines, stripped of their identities and turned into living ornaments for the pleasure and prestige of Rome's elite. Their fates were sealed by the cold economics of human trafficking and the relentless thirst for power and domination, revealing a side of the Roman Empire that few history documentaries dare to expose. These untold stories stand as forbidden truths, challenging our romanticized visions of Rome and demanding we confront the dark secrets of history, the same secrets that resonate chillingly with modern conversations about exploitation, consent, and the hidden costs of luxury. If you crave to uncover hidden history and crave Roman Empire scandal stories that pierce beneath the marble facades, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. Because today we're traveling back 2,000 years to witness how power and exploitation shaped not just an empire, but countless shattered lives in a chapter of human history that deserves to be remembered. While modern minds might draw a clear line between desire and exploitation, between affection freely given and submission coerced, the Roman Empire existed in a universe where such boundaries were blurred beyond recognition, where power itself was the only true law, and every intimate act carried the weight of hierarchy and domination, revealing a side of forbidden history that few dare to confront. In ancient Rome, social status determined not only a man's fate in the public square, but also the most private corners of his existence, weaving together politics, sexuality, and human worth into an inescapable web of control. The dark secrets of Rome's hidden power dynamics lay in the understanding that the body was currency and beauty was a commodity to be traded, displayed, or consumed for the pleasure of those who stood at the apex of society. For the Roman elite, male concubines were more than mere possessions. They were living emblems of wealth and influence, trophies, showcasing both personal power and cultural sophistication, echoing the same toxic blend of luxury and exploitation that fuels countless modern scandals. The untold truths lurking behind the empire's marble facades force us to ask how much of history has been sculpted by those who held the reins of desire as tightly as they held the reins of armies. And what does it say about a civilization when even its grandest monuments are shadowed by silent victims whose stories remain unspoken? The Roman Empire's dazzling splendor, so often celebrated in history, documentaries, and viral content about ancient wonders, concealed an intricate and ruthless social hierarchy where human trafficking was not merely an economic transaction, but a ritual of power, a ritual that would soon ensnare countless young men into lives of unimaginable servitude. And it is precisely here, within this oppressive structure, that the story of Rome's male concubines truly begins, a story that will take us deeper into the corridors of lavish villas, and darker still into the quiet terror that defined their every waking moment. It was within the echoing vaults of Rome's notorious slave markets, the same marketplaces that have become viral symbols in modern history. Documentaries of ancient human cruelty, where the fate of countless young men was decided under the cold gaze of wealth and power, revealing a dimension of human trafficking in history that remains as disturbing today as it was 2,000 years ago. These markets were not merely commercial hubs. They were stages upon which the drama of human commodification unfolded in brutal spectacle, where every muscle, complexion, and subtle gesture was scrutinized, as though one were selecting the finest marble for a statue. But instead, they were choosing flesh and blood, destined to serve behind the silken curtains of Rome's elite villas. Buyers roamed between rows of trembling youths, each boy stripped not just of clothing but of dignity, forced to endure probing examinations meant to assess their beauty, vitality, and potential for obedience, as if they were prized artifacts waiting to be displayed. Greek boys lauded for their refinement, and education became particularly coveted trophies, symbols of cultured sophistication that Roman aristocrats could flaunt as both intimate companions and conversational ornaments, while those from Germanic tribes fetched high prices for their fair skin and strong physiques, feeding into an ancient obsession that modern viral content often labels as the dark Roman secrets of race and desire. It is almost unthinkable to imagine standing there exposed and vulnerable as strangers debated your worth in coin. Your entire existence reduced to an economic equation calculated in sestertii, your future sealed with the fall of a hammer echoing through stone walls. Yet for many of these young men, this was the precise moment their identities were stolen. Their lives forever altered in the transaction that marked the beginning of an existence lived under constant surveillance, forced compliance, and a performance of gratitude that would come to define every breath they took. And while the sale itself was the first brutal severing of freedom, the true depth of their ordeal awaited them beyond the auction block within the private chambers of their masters, where their new roles as male concubines demanded not merely submission, but an intricate dance of survival in a world where refusing a command could mean punishment far worse than death. Once the auctioneer's hammer fell and the transaction was sealed, these young men were swept into the private sanctums of Rome's most opulent villas, entering a hidden world where luxury intertwined with relentless subjugation, a truth often sanitized in history documentaries, yet forming the core of Rome's dark secrets that modern audiences crave to uncover in forbidden history content. Life inside the master's household offered no escape from surveillance, for every glance, every word, every breath became a performance designed to please or placate their existence, a delicate balancing act between silent obedience and anticipated desire. Those fortunate enough, or perhaps unfortunate enough, to belong to Rome's wealthiest elite sometimes found themselves dressed in exquisite silks adorned with jewelry and surrounded by books, music, and the arts, their presence carefully curated to serve as living testaments to their master's cultivated taste and social standing. A human ornament that whispered of power and prestige. Yet even this facade of privilege masked an unending servitude, for these concubines were expected to be available at any hour, ready to fulfill any whim, their own desires, fears, and pain irrelevant against the backdrop of ancient luxury and cruelty. Others, less favored, endured lives scarcely better than common slaves, hidden away until summoned, then dismissed to stark quarters where privacy was non-existent, and hope even rarer, their silence demanded as part of the twisted ritual that kept the wheels of power turning in the shadows of Rome exposed. The rules were unwritten, yet mercilessly enforced, creating a hierarchy within a hierarchy where even among slaves, male concubines occupied a place both envied for perceived privilege and scorned as shameful tools of lust. Every gesture of kindness from a master was a double-edged blade, for favors granted could as swiftly be revoked, plunging the concubine into deeper humiliation or harsher punishment, weaving a tapestry of psychological warfare that blurred the line between privilege and torment. And while gilded walls might have glowed beneath the flicker of oil lamps, nothing could illuminate the darkness that seeped into the hearts of these young men, preparing them for the silent terror that would shape their very souls. A terror we must now explore as we step deeper into the psychological prisons built not of stone, but of fear manipulation, and the unending demand to smile while dying inside. Yet perhaps the most devastating chains were not those forged of iron, but those delicately wound around the mind, for the young men trapped in Rome's glittering prisons endured a relentless psychological assault that history often overlooks, even in the most daring viral exposés of the Roman Empire's dark secrets. The daily existence of a male concubine was a theater of forced smiles and hollow gratitude, where the slightest tremor of fear or flicker of resistance could provoke punishment so severe that silence and submission became the only shields against a world designed to consume them whole. Living beneath gilded ceilings did little to ease the terror of not knowing when a master might summon them, for what purpose, or what new humiliation might be demanded in the name of power and pleasure, a reality that resonates chillingly with modern conversations about psychological abuse in history and the hidden trauma carried by its victims. Imagine the weight of performing endless gratitude while your own soul splinters beneath the cruelty of an existence dictated by another's whims, your emotions weaponized, your dignity systematically stripped away until even your own reflection becomes a stranger. In such an environment, every glance was fraught with meaning, every gesture measured for signs of defiance or despair, and even the gentlest kindnesses were barbed traps designed to bind these young men more tightly to the masters who owned not just their bodies, but their very thoughts. And while their public facade might have exuded grace and refinement behind the scenes, raged an internal battle for survival, fought in silence and hidden from the marble halls where Rome's elite congratulated themselves on their civility and culture. These were not simply servants. They were human beings, forced to become actors in their own tragedy, compelled to smile while dying inside their laughter, echoing like ghosts through corridors that reeked of perfume and quiet despair. And as we peel back the layers of Rome's forbidden truths, it becomes clear that the psychological torment inflicted upon these young men was not merely a byproduct of slavery, but a deliberate tool of control, a reality we must explore further as we examine the ruthless strategies of manipulation that awaited them behind every silken curtain and whispered command. Beneath the dazzling facade of Rome's opulence, where marble columns gleamed and golden mosaics caught the light of countless oil lamps, a far more sinister reality thrived, one forged not merely in chains and whips, but in the silent battlefield of the human mind, revealing forbidden history and toxic power dynamics that even modern viral content only begins to scratch. For the masters of Rome understood with chilling clarity that true domination required more than physical subjugation. It demanded psychological manipulation so profound that their victims would eventually police themselves, a tactic that transformed the private quarters of Rome's elite into laboratories of hidden abuse. The young male concubines were subjected to a relentless cycle of calculated kindness and sudden cruelty, the same twisted rhythm that has echoed through the ages in every dark chapter of human exploitation, leaving scars far deeper than any lash across the skin. One moment a concubine might be draped in silk and praised for his grace, offered a taste of honeyed fruit, or a whispered compliment that hinted at favor. The next, he might be stripped of privileges, confined, or subjected to public humiliation for a perceived slight. His sense of security shattered again and again until he no longer trusted his own instincts. In this way, masters held their victims in a constant state of anxiety, never certain whether the day would bring reward or punishment, sowing seeds of dependency that left these young men trapped in a psychological maze with no exit. Even the rare moments of affection or gentle words were merely tools sharpened into weapons, for they conditioned the concubines to seek their master's approval as the sole measure of safety and worth. And while the marble walls of Roman villas kept secrets behind their cold elegance, the most chilling truth was that these young men were not just prisoners in body, but prisoners in mind. Their personalities systematically dismantled and rebuilt into instruments of compliance. This invisible war of the psyche was perhaps Rome's cruelest invention, and it is precisely this dark genius of control that leads us to the next layer of the empire's hidden machinery, the use of education itself as another subtle yet devastating tool of domination. Among the many tools wielded by Rome's elite to cement their invisible chains of power, few were as insidiously effective as the weaponization of education, a facet of forbidden truths that modern viral explorations of Rome's dark secrets seldom reveal in full, for here knowledge itself became a double-edged sword, slicing away at the very soul of those forced to acquire it. In the glittering corridors of villas, where frescoes whispered tales of gods and triumphs, young male concubines found themselves plunged into a curriculum that appeared on the surface as a gift of enlightenment, but was in truth a meticulous exercise in psychological control, transforming them into intellectual adornments designed to amuse, impress, and entertain their masters. They learned poetry, rhetoric, philosophy, and the intricacies of literature not for personal growth or freedom of thought, but to become instruments of their owners' social prestige, living testaments to the refined tastes of those who could afford to possess both beauty and cultured conversation. Every line of Virgil recited, every debate about Stoic virtue served not the concubines' liberation, but their deeper entrapment, for their learning was permitted only so long as it remained pleasing and harmless, a dazzling performance of intellect that disguised the silence imposed upon their own opinions and desires. This calculated education carved new prisons within the mind, as the concubines were taught to anticipate topics that would flatter their master, to offer insights that never threatened, and to laugh at jokes no matter how cruel, creating a deadly dance where a single wrong word could tip the scales from favor to punishment. It was an exquisite cruelty that intertwined the beauty of knowledge with the horror of subjugation, revealing how even Rome's famed pursuit of wisdom could become a mechanism for domination and psychological enslavement. And while their tongues spoke eloquent verses and their eyes sparkled with rehearsed wit, the truth remained that beneath each carefully crafted response lay a silent scream echoing through gilded halls that demanded perfection, obedience, and a beauty that was not merely intellectual, but also physical, a beauty whose relentless maintenance awaits us in the next even darker chamber of Rome's hidden labyrinth. Beneath the silken drapes and the perfumed corridors of Rome's lavish villas, another dimension of cruelty pulsed in silence, for beauty in ancient Rome was never merely admired, it was demanded, curated, and brutally enforced, revealing dark secrets of ancient Rome that remain chilling even under modern scrutiny of forbidden beauty standards. The young male concubines, already stripped of autonomy and molded into intellectual companions, now found their very flesh subjected to an unending regimen designed to maintain them as perfect human trophies, ornaments of flesh whose youth and allure were not simply desired but required. Their days were punctuated by routines of exercise, strict diets, and cosmetic treatments, all orchestrated under the watchful eyes of those who saw them not as human beings, but as living masterpieces to be displayed for social prestige and whispered envy, echoing scandals that today's viral history content would label as hidden cruelty and body manipulation. Some endured procedures meant to refine features or preserve a youthful glow, practices carried out without the mercy of modern anesthesia, transforming beauty into a theater of pain and silent terror, while their masters paraded them through gatherings as evidence of wealth, taste, and absolute power. Every strand of hair was groomed, every gesture rehearsed, every inch of skin examined for blemishes that could provoke disgust or disfavor of vigilance that transformed these young men into prisoners within their own bodies, forever at war with the passage of time and the inevitable betrayal of human flesh. The clothes and jewels draped upon them shimmered like victory banners, yet beneath the silk lay bruises, both visible and unseen reminders that beauty in Rome was a currency whose cost was paid in fear, silence, and unimaginable suffering. And while the public marveled at these flawless figures, few understood that every dazzling smile masked a constant terror of falling out of favor, of becoming obsolete, discarded, or replaced by fresher beauty, a fear that grew sharper with each passing year. For even the most radiant concubine, no matter how carefully maintained, could never escape the truth that he was merely a possession, an exquisite object to be shown off at feasts or carried along on journeys, which brings us to yet another hidden chamber in Rome's labyrinthine cruelty, the world of travel, where these young men became not only slaves of flesh and mind, but portable property forced to perform their roles no matter how far from the marble palaces they once called home. In the grand tapestry of Rome's opulence, where emperors boasted dominion over distant lands, and the scent of exotic spices wafted through marble corridors, another far darker thread wove its way through the fabric of daily life, the transformation of young male concubines into portable human property, an aspect of the dark secrets of ancient Rome that modern viral content only dares to hint at under the alluring banners of luxury and slavery. For travel in the Roman Empire, whether to seaside villas, political assemblies in distant provinces, or elaborate festivals in rival cities, was never a matter of mere leisure for these boys. It was an extension of their bondage, a cruel reminder that no matter how gilded their cages they were, possessions first and foremost expected to perform their roles wherever their masters demanded. These journeys, draped in the trappings of grandeur and status, hid the brutal reality that concubines were uprooted at a moment's notice, forced to navigate new social terrains, languages, and dangers, all while maintaining the same flawless obedience and cultivated charm that marked them as prized accessories in their master's retinue. Behind the dazzling spectacles and parades that viral documentaries celebrate lay the silent terror of these young men who, even while riding in luxurious litters or strolling through foreign marketplaces, lived under the constant weight of watchful eyes, never free to marvel at new landscapes or taste true freedom. Each mile traveled further severed their ties to any sense of home or identity, replacing personal roots with the shifting sands of servitude that might see them displayed like trophies before new audiences eager to gossip over Rome's forbidden history and hidden cruelty. Their beauty and refinement, once confined to private chambers, became public theater fueling whispers of scandal and envy that followed them like shadows across the empire. And while the masters flaunted their human ornaments as symbols of power, few acknowledged the quiet anguish of boys who, though adorned in silk and gold, were forced to perform the same acts of intimacy and entertainment far from the palaces where their tragedies had begun. For in Rome's ruthless calculus, a concubine's duty knew no borders, and even the road itself became another arena for exploitation, leading us inexorably toward examining the precarious social standing these young men occupied among both slaves and free citizens, a standing built on beauty, obedience, and a silence more profound than any distance traveled. Though draped in silks and glittering with jewels that caught the flickering torchlight of Rome's endless banquets, the male concubines remained trapped in a cruel paradox. For within the intricate lattice of Rome's hidden hierarchy, they occupied a place of both visible luxury and invisible shame, revealing dark Roman secrets that modern viral explorations of forbidden history can only begin to expose. To the free citizens who lounged in marble atriums and debated philosophy over honeyed wine. These young men were curiosities, a spectacle to be admired, perhaps even envied, yet never truly respected their worth, measured entirely by the whims of those who owned them. In the eyes of other slaves, they often became figures of scorn or quiet resentment, perceived as recipients of undeserved favor because of their proximity to power, even as few understood that such privilege was nothing but a gilded cage. This social stigma formed an invisible prison more suffocating than any physical chains, for these concubines were neither fully slaves nor remotely free existing, instead in a liminal space where they were both indispensable and entirely disposable. Every smile they offered, every graceful gesture performed before an audience was a desperate attempt to maintain fragile favor, knowing that a single misstep could shatter their precarious standing and cast them into deeper degradation. Beneath the murmured compliments and lavish gifts lay the constant terror of becoming obsolete, for beauty fades, and in Rome's brutal economy of human value, youth was currency that depreciated with ruthless certainty. The concubines' presence within elite circles served as a testament to their masters' power and sophistication, yet at the same time marked them as perpetual outsiders, never granted the dignity or identity of true belonging. And while Rome's historians lauded the empire's grand achievements and moral virtues, they rarely paused to consider how an entire class of human beings could be paraded like living trophies while silently enduring a life defined by fear, alienation, and stolen humanity. For behind the laughter echoing through marble halls lurked the unanswered question: what price did these young men and the families they were torn from pay so that Rome might shine so brightly, a question that leads us inexorably toward the shadows, cast not only over concubines themselves, but over the communities and homes left bleeding in their absence. Beyond the glittering walls of Rome's villas and the hush of secret chambers where young concubines lived their hidden tragedies, there rippled consequences that stained the lives of families and communities, left behind an aspect of Rome's dark secrets that even the most viral forbidden history narratives seldom dare to illuminate in full. For every boy stripped from his homeland, there were parents who spent countless nights staring into empty spaces, wondering if their son still breathed, or if he lay buried in some foreign land, anonymous and forgotten beneath the weight of an empire's relentless hunger for beauty and power. The hidden cost of Rome's splendor was paid not only in flesh, but in the tears of mothers, the silent grief of fathers, and the shattering of communities forced to sacrifice their children either through conquest kidnapping or the unbearable burden of debt slavery. families who surrendered a son to pay off insurmountable debts lived with the unspeakable guilt of choosing survival for the many over freedom for the one, a human calculus as brutal as any gladiatorial contest played out in Rome's blood-soaked arenas. The echo of that sacrifice haunted entire villages, leaving scars that outlasted marble monuments and triumphal arches, feeding a collective trauma whispered through generations. Even in distant provinces, the knowledge that Rome's soldiers or traders might appear at any moment to claim the young for the markets of human trafficking sowed fear like a plague, turning once vibrant communities into places of suspicion and mourning. These untold stories are not simply historical footnotes, but searing reminders that the empire's grandeur rested upon the silent suffering of those whose names history refused to record, hidden victims whose anguish resonates through time. And as we draw closer to the final chapters of this grim narrative, one truth emerges with chilling clarity, that even in the face of such overwhelming power, some among these young men dared to defy their fate, risking everything for a fleeting taste of freedom, a defiance that beckons us into the harrowing tales of resistance and the ruthless consequences Rome reserved for any who tried to escape its iron grasp. Yet even under the crushing weight of Rome's omnipresent power, where every corridor whispered surveillance and every smile masked silent obedience, there burned within some young concubines a spark that refused to be extinguished, a truth that reveals one of the dark Roman secrets often eclipsed in forbidden history accounts, yet essential to understanding the human spirit's defiance. For among the countless boys forced into gilded bondage, there were those who dared to dream of escape, who risked everything for even the briefest breath of freedom, transforming their private despair into acts of desperate rebellion that modern viral narratives might frame as hidden acts of resistance buried beneath the empire's marble facade. These untold stories of courage echo through time as young men plotted routes out of fortified villas, whispered secrets to sympathetic servants, or seized fleeting opportunities when their masters were distracted by festivals or distant political affairs. But the price of such defiance was steep, for Rome's elite would tolerate no challenge to the illusion of absolute control. Those caught attempting to flee faced punishment so savage that they transcended mere physical pain, designed to break both body and spirit, and to serve as chilling spectacles meant to deter others. Public whippings, branding, or forced labor in the harshest mines were meted out not only as personal vengeance but as calculated warnings, etching fear into the hearts of all who witnessed the consequences. In some cases, concubines driven beyond endurance chose suicide as the only remaining act of autonomy, though even this escape was often denied, for masters guarded their human investments, jealously removing means of self-harm and stationing watchful eyes to ensure no property was lost. The tragedy lies not only in the physical suffering, but in the relentless psychological warfare, where the hope of freedom became both a lifeline and a deadly snare. These hidden victims remind us that while Rome's monuments proclaim triumph and civilization behind them, lie stories written in blood and tears, proof that even in the darkest systems of oppression, the yearning for liberty cannot be completely smothered. And it is into this collision of faith and fear, hope and despair, that we now step to uncover how religion and spiritual belief offered either solace or further chains to those trapped in Rome's cruel embrace. Even in a civilization that draped itself in marble grandeur and proclaimed devotion to gods of justice and protection, the young male concubines of Rome found little sanctuary beneath the empire's religious canopy, revealing yet another layer of dark Roman secrets that modern viral narratives of forbidden history have only begun to unearth. For though temples rose skyward in dazzling splendor and sacrifices were made in the names of deities said to watch over the weak, the divine protections of Rome rarely extended to those whose bodies had been claimed as property, whose suffering was rendered invisible beneath the glitter of imperial triumph. For many concubines, the gods of Rome seemed distant, silent witnesses to their daily humiliations, leaving them to search elsewhere for solace in a world that stripped them of identity and autonomy. Some turned their eyes toward the mysterious allure of foreign cults and forbidden faiths whispered about in hushed tones behind villa walls. Rites dedicated to Isis, Mithras, or other deities whose secrets offered a flicker of hope, or at least the comforting illusion of being seen by a higher power. These clandestine gatherings, pulsing with music, incense, and symbolic rituals, provided brief moments where concubines could remember they were more than mere instruments of pleasure, allowing them to taste, however fleetingly, the forbidden fruit of belonging and spiritual resistance. Yet even these fragile sanctuaries were fraught with peril, for masters often dictated every facet of their concubines' existence, including faith, and any hint of devotion outside the sanctioned gods of Rome could provoke suspicion, punishment, or further isolation. In this way, religion, which should have been a refuge, became another arena of control, another mechanism by which Rome exposed its brutal genius for bending every human impulse, even the search for meaning, into chains. The concubines' silent prayers whispered into darkness were both acts of rebellion and desperate attempts to stitch together fragments of a self shattered by relentless subjugation, proving that even the deepest systems of oppression could not fully extinguish the human hunger for connection, hope, and transcendence. And as we shift our gaze from altars and hidden sanctuaries back to the harsh economic realities that underpinned this monstrous trade, we are forced to confront the machinery of human trafficking that turned suffering into profit on an imperial scale, a machinery that awaits us in the next dark chamber of Rome's hidden history. Beneath the polished marble floors of Rome's opulent halls, behind the laughter of banquets and the solemn recitations of philosophy, there pulsed an economic engine driven not merely by grain gold or conquest, but by the flesh and futures of countless human beings. A dark Roman secret that viral explorations of forbidden history now strive to expose under the harsh light of modern scrutiny. For while the empire's scholars boasted of laws, culture, and civil order, the brutal truth remained that human trafficking was a cornerstone of Rome's wealth, transforming young male concubines into commodities whose value was meticulously calculated, negotiated, and exploited, echoing a hidden economy where profit always outweighed humanity. Slave markets flourished as centers of commerce, but also as theaters of human degradation where boys were trained in special schools, not unlike the famed gladiator Ludi, molded through relentless physical regimens and psychological conditioning into perfect instruments of pleasure and entertainment for Rome's elite. Every aspect of their existence was monetized, from their appearance and talents to the most intimate contours of their private selves, all transformed into lucrative assets in an empire addicted to luxury and display. These transactions were not isolated affairs, but part of a vast network that spanned provinces, seas, and cultures, a supply chain fueled by conquest debt and the cold arithmetic of demand and scarcity. The prices these young men fetched became whispered status symbols among aristocrats, further entrenching a culture where beauty and suffering were intimately entwined, a culture whose monstrous appetite devoured not only the victims themselves, but the innocence of entire communities drawn into this grim marketplace. And while Rome's historians etched triumphs and treaties into stone, they seldom recorded the human cost behind those gleaming inscriptions, the shattered identities, the broken families, and the silent screams echoing beneath layers of silk and gold. For every sestertius earned in this hidden economy was stained with invisible blood, a reality that compels us to look beyond Rome's outward grandeur and into the lasting scars left upon those who survived its merciless commerce, scars that would haunt not just individual lives but the very fabric of society itself, a haunting we must now explore as we turn our gaze toward the cruel aftermath awaiting those who could no longer sustain the impossible standards imposed upon them. Even in an empire renowned for its eternal monuments and immortal fame, the beauty that Rome so ruthlessly extracted from the bodies of young concubines could not withstand the inexorable march of time, leaving behind a haunting aftermath that modern viral narratives of forbidden history often hint at, yet seldom capture in its full devastating scope. For the fate of these young men, once the glow of youth faded and the tight confines of Rome's aesthetic demands could no longer be met, was a plunge into shadows darker than the marbled chambers where they once stood, adorned in silk and gold. Some deemed no longer worthy of display were discarded with a cold finality that mirrored the ruthless economy which had once prized them, so highly sold into lower forms of servitude or cast aside without resources, status, or hope, their former privileges evaporating as swiftly as a drop of scented oil on a heated brazier. Others found themselves navigating a world that remembered them not as individuals, but as living relics of scandal marked by whispers and veiled glances, their identities forever entwined with the secrets of powerful men who now preferred to forget them. And for the precious few who managed to claw their way to freedom and some measure of stability, the cost was often silence and the obliteration of their past. For survival demanded they bury the truth of who they had been, lest the stain of their history bar them from any chance at dignity or acceptance. This untold aftermath is not merely a historical curiosity, but a testament to the human toll exacted by a civilization that prized external perfection while consuming the souls of those it deemed beautiful. It forces us to confront the dark Roman secrets lurking behind the empire's triumphs, reminding us that beneath the polished facade lay countless lives erased from memory, each one a silent monument to suffering. And it is into the invisible wounds etched deep into the minds and spirits of these young men, wounds that would shape every relationship, every breath, every attempt at reclaiming humanity, that we now turn to explore the psychological scars and social exile that awaited those who survived Rome's relentless gaze. Beneath the grand arches and immortal columns that proclaimed Rome's eternal glory, the true ruins lay unseen, etched not into stone, but into the fragile architecture of human souls. For the young men who survived the empire's gilded cages bore invisible wounds that would haunt every step of their remaining lives, a hidden legacy of dark Roman secrets that modern viral explorations of forbidden history are only beginning to unveil. The psychological scars inflicted upon these former concubines were not simply remnants of physical exploitation, but profound fractures in their very sense of self, for they had been forced to perform gratitude while enduring daily violations of dignity, transforming every smile into a mask, every gesture into an act of survival. Having been conditioned to read their master's slightest moods to anticipate desires before words were spoken, these men emerged from bondage, burdened with a hyper-vigilance that turned even mundane interactions into arenas of silent fear, never fully certain if kindness was genuine or merely the prelude to cruelty. Relationships outside the walls of Rome's villas were equally fraught, for the concubines' pasts hung over them like an invisible brand, marking them as both objects of curiosity and silent shame, their very presence a living reminder of the empire's forbidden pleasures and hidden cruelties. Many struggled with isolation, unable to forge genuine bonds, haunted by memories that intruded without warning, echoing through sleepless nights in whispers of humiliation and lost identity. The tragedy lay in how Rome's system not only exploited their bodies, but rewired their minds, erasing the natural boundaries between consent and coercion, between affection freely given and affection performed under threat. For these men, freedom was not simply a physical condition, but an emotional labyrinth from which few ever truly escaped, a labyrinth lined with memories that continued to shape every thought, every connection, every hesitant step toward normalcy. These untold stories remind us that historical cruelty does not always end with the fall of empires, for its shadows stretch forward into the hearts of survivors, coloring even their moments of fleeting peace with shades of lingering terror. And as we peer deeper into Rome's shimmering facade, we must also confront the broader question: how could such systematic cruelty flourish unchecked? And what does it reveal about a society so willing to look away? A question that beckons us now into the chilling realm of collective complicity and the silent consent of Rome's citizens and historians alike. As we strip away the opulent veils of Rome's imperial facade, we are left staring into a truth as chilling as any gladiatorial spectacle: that the systematic exploitation of young male concubines could never have flourished without the silent complicity of an entire society, a dark Roman secret that modern viral narratives of forbidden history now strive to drag into the light. The Roman elite, who paraded their human trophies through marble halls and lavish banquets, were not lone monsters acting in isolation. They operated within a cultural framework that not only tolerated such cruelties, but wove them seamlessly into the fabric of social prestige and power. Ordinary citizens, poets, philosophers, and historians alike averted their eyes or dressed these horrors in euphemisms, choosing the comfort of collective silence over the discomfort of confronting moral atrocity, a pattern of moral blindness that echoes disturbingly across centuries. The same society that built aqueducts and inscribed virtues of honor and civic duty onto stone found no contradiction in reducing human beings to commodities, each transaction lubricated by denial and the quiet understanding that beauty and suffering were acceptable prices for maintaining Rome's shimmering dominance. And so the laughter in crowded villas, the clinking of goblets beneath frescoed ceilings, masked an invisible chorus of pain that no one wished to acknowledge, leaving the concubines trapped not only by the masters who owned their bodies, but by an entire world willing to pretend they did not exist. It is a terrifying testament to how a civilization can construct monumental achievements while simultaneously institutionalizing unseen cruelties, a forbidden history that demands we ask, what monstrous systems might we ourselves overlook today, hidden behind the walls of progress and prosperity? For even as we peer into Rome's shadows, we cannot escape the reflections staring back at us, reminding us that history's hidden victims are not confined to the past. And as we stand on the brink of this final revelation, it is time to turn our gaze toward the present, to draw the lessons etched into Rome's marble and blood, and ask what we owe to those whose silent suffering still whispers through the corridors of time, a question we now confront as we draw our journey to its haunting conclusion. And so as we step back from Rome's marble shadows, the forbidden history we have uncovered refuses to remain a relic of the past, for the dark Roman secrets of human commodification, silent suffering, and societal complicity echo eerily within our own world, whispering that progress and civilization often stand atop foundations stained with invisible blood. The untold stories of these young concubines remind us that the human soul, even under chains of flesh or mind, carries a spark of dignity that no empire, however vast, can fully extinguish, a truth both haunting and profoundly hopeful. It forces us to ask, how many hidden victims suffer today unseen, unheard, because we too choose comfort over confrontation? And what does it say about us if we marvel at the beauty of the past, without daring to see the agony that made such beauty possible? This isn't merely Rome's story. It's ours, a mirror held up to our modern age, daring us to look deeper and refuse to let history's hidden victims remain nameless. Let this knowledge not weigh us down with sorrow, but sharpen our resolve to ensure no human being ever again becomes a possession to be bought, displayed, or discarded. Because in remembering them, we reclaim our own humanity. If this journey has shaken you, enlightened you, or made you question the cost of empires, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me how this forbidden history resonates with you. Don't forget to save this video so you can revisit these truths, and if you crave more untold stories and dark secrets from history, hit that subscribe button and join me as we continue to expose the past, and perhaps in doing so, help heal the future.